Owls in the Family, Chapter 5. Though there were only a few more weeks left of school before the summer holidays began, each day seemed like 100 years long. I could hear the river boiling over the sandbars as I sat at my desk, and I could smell the sticky, sweet smell of the young poplar leaves. Our school stood right beside the river, and every now and then a flock of ducks would go over the playground, quack, quack, quacking, as if they were laughing at us for being stuck inside, while they were flying free across the wide prairie. What made it even worse for me was just sitting there wondering what my owls were doing. After school, I would jump on my bike and pedal like 40 over the bridge and down our street. When I got close to home, I would give a couple of owl whoops to let Wool and Weeps know that I was coming. By the time I skidded into the yard and parked my bike, they would be tramping impatiently up and down the cage. As soon as the door was open, they would come waddling out as fast as they could, ready for play. Wool liked to scramble up on the back of an old lawn chair. Then he would take a wild leap and try to land on my shoulder. If he missed, he would nosedive into the lawn, but it never bothered him much. He would hop back to the chair, climb up, and try again until finally he made my shoulder. Weeps was different. He never believed he could do anything by himself, and so he would just sit on the lawn and whimper until I picked him up and put him on my shoulder. I think Weeps' spirit must have been broken in the oil drum, because as long as I knew him, he was always afraid of doing things. With both owls riding on my shoulders, I used to go down the street to where our gang played games in an empty lot. Kick the Can was a favorite game that spring. Oh, Corinne, remember when you taught us how to play Kick the Can up in the woods? That's cool. You must have got the idea from you. So Kick the Can, or Can the Can, was a favorite game that spring, sort of a combination of baseball and football. We used an inflated rubber beach ball that belonged to Murray. And when all the kids got chasing it, Wool would get so excited. He would join in too. One time he got in the way of the ball just when someone kicked it and knocked the wind clean out of him. The next time the ball came near him, he made a jump and got hold of it with both sets of claws. There was a hissing noise, and the ball went limp. Wool was pleased as punch, but we weren't, because it was the only ball we had. All the kids except Bruce and Murray were a bit scared of the owls. So when I had them on my shoulders, I could go anywhere in Saskatoon and be safe as houses. Even the tough kids down by the flour mill kept their distance when I had the owls with me. Those owls were better bodyguards than tigers. Wool and Weeps grew fast. Weeps would eat anything he could get and still be hungry. That sounds like my son. But Wool was fussy about his food. At first, Wool would only eat cooked butcher's meat, hard-boiled eggs, and fig cookies. Later on, he would eat anything that came from our table, even vegetables, all except parsnips, which he hated. Parsnips are like white, bitter carrots. Occasionally, both owls would eat a dead gopher that some kid had shot or snared as a present for them, but they didn't really like their supper raw. By the middle of June, when they were 3 months old, my new pets had reached full size. Wool was a little bigger than Weeps and stood about 2 feet high, and his wing spread was nearly 5 feet across. Can you make a big wing spread? The claws of both were about 1 inch long and as sharp as needles, and their big hooked beaks looked as strong enough to open a tin can. Weeps was a normal owl color, sort of a mottled brown, but Wool stayed almost pure white, with just a few black markings on his feathers. At night he looked like a ghost. Although they were grown up now, neither of the owls seemed to know what his wings were for. Because they saw us walking around, they seemed to think they could walk around too. Maybe if I had been able to fly, they would have learned to fly a lot sooner. But the way things were, both owls tried to do what we kids did. They saw us climbing trees, and so they tried to climb trees. It was pretty silly to watch Wool climbing. He used to really climb. First he'd jump up to a low branch, and then he'd use his beak and his claws to half lift himself and half shinny to the next branch. Do you know what shinny means? Kind of squirm your way up. My pigeons used to circle around sometimes and watch him. They must have thought he was crazy. People sometimes thought so too. One day, Will was climbing a poplar in our front yard when a man and a woman stopped on the sidewalk and watched him with their mouths open. Like that. Finally, the man said to me, "What on earth's the matter with that bird? Why doesn't he fly to the top of the tree?" "He can't fly, sir," I replied. "He's never learned how." The man looked at me as if I were crazy too and walked off without another word. The day Will actually learned to fly was one I remember for a long time. He had climbed a cottonwood in the backyard and had got way out on a thin little branch and couldn't get back. You never saw an animal look so unhappy. He kept teetering up and down to the end of the branch and hooing at me to come and get him out of his fix. Fix means like his situation. Dad and Mother came out to see what was going on, and they started to laugh, because whoever heard of a bird that couldn't get itself down off a tree? But when people laughed at Will, it hurt his feelings and upset him.